Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Islam Between the Lines. My name is Farooq. This is our first episode on the topic of taxation. The reason for choosing taxation as my first topic is its pervasive and piercing effect on our lives all over the world. We know adventurous wars annihilate hundreds of thousands of military men and civilians and pound the hearts of all those who fail to die in them. It may not be wrong to generalize that these wars owe their existence to the wrong and ruthless taxes. Also, the wars that are fought for territorial expansions are basically daydreams of economic well-being that are eventually shattered in the end. Taxation is an integral part of any economic order, which, however, is not our topic for now. We will remain confined to its subtopic of taxation only. Apart from wars, even the peacetime lives have been rendered hellish under the unrestricted taxation which our governments think they are divinely entitled to impose. Every government assumes that it has an unlimited authority to tax its people in whatever names and for whatever purposes. In the process, men who govern, in fact, appropriate to themselves even that which is payable by the generations not even born yet. In these few episodes on taxation, we will be discussing the ethics and range of fiscal governance that has the generation of revenue, unlike expenditure, as its mainstay. The reason being that while expenditure can be targeted and specified, revenue is generated from the people in general. For the purpose of this discussion, we shall be assuming that the people genuinely own their wealth and they generate their incomes legitimately. We will not go into the propriety of ownership here. Yet, to use the words of late economist Dr. Muhammad Najatullah Siddiqui, my virtual mentor, you will have some brilliant flashes to watch. Humans are not wild. We live in societies which are bound to create clash and conflict if we do not civilize them. So we need law or religion to regulate our conduct. But laws will be dead letters if those are not backed by the power of enforcement. However, enforcement of laws cannot be done by the people directly, as that will be more chaotic and disruptive than disciplining or deterring. Everybody would be a judge in his own cause. As laws are better enforced by the governments, we need governments for both internal governance as well as external protection. But government can do this only when it is properly and adequately funded. So we have the taxes as primary and substantial source of funds necessary for governance. Tax is thus understood as a financial charge or some other form of levy imposed by a government on a taxpayer who may be an individual or other legal entity to fund government spending and public expenditure. Characteristics of a tax are that it is regularly levied by government under its sovereign authority and is thus compulsorily payable by the taxpayers. They cannot refuse to pay taxes. Nevertheless, taxes are not the only source of income for governments. There are also various other sources of non-tax income which, however, do not qualify as taxes. These include fees charged for various paid facilities provided by government, income from some commercial activities performed by government, fines imposed for various breaches of law. These incomes do not qualify as taxes in spite of their being receivable by the government. The reason being that a person has the freedom to avoid them. He may not avail of a particular service or buy a commodity, so he will not pay for the same. Similarly, if he does not break a law, he will not pay any fine. On the contrary, the more law-abiding a person is, the more tax-compliant he will be. Another rare income comes from war spoils, which too is obviously a non-tax income. The modern governments have contrived a new source of non-tax income in the form of debt, which is raised from certain financial institutions as well as from the general public. These institutions are simply the lenders to governments, and the public is said to invest in government bonds, which are considered very secured investment, being backed by sovereign governments. This debt has come to be a very convenient source of sizable government funding, because unlike some very harsh taxes which annoy the public, there is no public resentment to it. The cool argument of need and necessity cools down all. A Muslim or an Islamic government also needs taxes pretty much the same way as any other government under the sun. Islam does not create any spiritual or divine source of income for the government. However, it has provided a strong system of taxation for adequate government funding with very little scope for misuse or exploitation. Before discussing the tax regime of Islam, there are some important points to clear. Foremost would be the non-Muslims' possible objection to discuss Islamic taxation in the first place. Second in line would be some Muslims' objection to any Islamic taxes on the basis of many a Muslim scholars' view that there are only few or no taxes in Islam. If I may contain these two objections, then only you might like to continue with this series, to know about the extent of the government's authority to tax its people and the real form of the good taxes. Non-Muslims are free to differ with Islam as they are free to live with that difference. I am not here to tell them to change that opinion. I repeat, I am not pitching for change of that opinion. What I am telling them is to lend a little of their precious time first to know what Quran tells us about handling our differences, that too without giving them up. Another reason is also there. Last century has witnessed capitalism and socialism in simultaneous action. While capitalism gave freedom to entrepreneurs to produce any goods and to the consumers to choose from them, the socialists' economies used to be planned and controlled by the few at helm. At length of time, collapse of the communist states made the sole survivor of capitalism to count all demerits of the former as its own merits. Its resultant unopposed global presence upgraded the market economy to the level of market philosophy, in which greed became the capitalism and capital the sole criterion of success. In effect, ironically, the wealth has been since concentrating in the hands of a very limited number of super rich people, creating a persistent and generally painful inequality. These billionaires are not wary of hailing the capitalism, which nonetheless owes an audience to what the deprived billions have to say about it. Comparison of capitalism and socialism is not the scope of our topic. We just talked about them briefly only to say that taxation in all forms is equally pampered by both of them, despite their sharp contrast. Therefore, even on the basis of seriality, Islamic taxation model deserves a consideration now. The unique thing about Islamic model is its immutable structure, which does not admit any internal interference or external influence. The reasons are its sources. Both the Quranic verses as well as the prophetic hadiths are not amenable to any change, because no one is above, superior to Allah or His last messenger. However, the interpretations and understandings may change from time to time or from school to school, without tending to distort or overturn the basic text or their dictum. Whenever and wherever Muslims have failed to apply Islam properly, they alone have suffered by loss of the opportunity. Others can always look forward. Now, for proper understanding and handling of our differences with the non-Muslims, I choose the example of none other than the father of all opposition and defiance, the Satan or Shaytan or Iblis. So let us read his story as narrated in the Holy Quran. It says that human race started with the creation of one person, of Adam. Chapter 4 verse 1, chapter 6 verse 98, chapter 7 verse 189 and chapter 39 verse 6. However, long before actually creating Adam, Almighty Allah lovingly made His mention to the angels and also conveyed His order in advance to prostrate before Adam once He had fashioned him and blown His soul into him. Quran chapter 15 verses 28, 29 and chapter 38 verses 71, 72. Subsequently, when Allah did create Adam, all the angels prostrated before him as directed. Quran chapter 2 verse 34, chapter 7 verse 11, verses 11, chapter 15 verse 30, chapter 17 verse 61, chapter 18 verse 50, chapter 20 verse 116 and chapter 38 verse 73. Unlike angels, however, Shaytan refused to prostrate before Adam. When asked by Allah about the reason for his failure or refusal, he replied that he won't prostrate because he is superior to Adam, as he has been created of fire while Adam is created of clay. Quran chapter 7 verse 12 and chapter 38 verse 75. Thus riled, Allah said to him, "Get out of there, that is the Jannah, as you are not permitted to have pride there and are among the low." Quran chapter 7 verse 13 and chapter 38 verse 77. Allah further said, "And verily my curse is on you till the day of judgment." Quran chapter 38 verse 77. Now, as per verse 12 of chapter 7, Allah asked Shaitan, "What prevented you from prostrating before Adam as I had commanded you?" And as per verse 29 of chapter 15 and verse 72 of chapter 38, Allah had commanded the angels to prostrate before Adam. Now, this might look like a contradiction. Command is basically directed towards the angels, but then Shaitan is also questioned about it. Actually, there is no contradiction at all. Adam was created in Jannah, though from the clay taken from this earth. On the contrary, Shaitan, who is from the non-human genre of jinn, had been created quite earlier and from the fire. Prior to Adam's creation, Shaitan had been such a devout that he used to be in the company of the angels and in Jannah also with them. But when Allah mentioned His plan to create Adam from clay and issued advance order to the angels that they shall prostrate to him when he is actually created, fashioned and brought to life, Shaitan was present with them, and thus he too heard this all. The angel's order of prostration evoked a feeling of jealousy in him. He thought that he is superior to Adam because of his fire origin, and this originated pride in his heart. So the prostration command that was really for the angels only reached Shaytan perchance because he happened to be present with them at that time. When Shaytan started hosting arrogance, Adam was not mentioned by Allah. Adam was only mentioned by Allah and was not yet created. Allah was well aware of it, as He knows all that is revealed or concealed. Now He could well have immediately ordered eviction of Shaitan from the Jannah. But in that case, none else would have known about Shaitan's arrogance, and thus neither justice would have appeared to have been done, nor any lessons would have evolved for us to learn. Intention of a person is not manifested unless and until it has been translated or attempted to be translated into practice. Accordingly, Shaitan's arrogance had to be made known first. Therefore, Allah waited for him to expose himself. Here I may mention briefly Hadith number 32 of chapter 68 of Sahih Bukhari to make perspective for what I have to say next. Barira and Mughith were a slave couple during the Prophet's time. One day Mughith was going behind his wife weeping. The Prophet asked Barira why she wasn't returning to him. She said, "Do you order me to do so?" The Prophet said, "No, I am only interceding for him." She said, "In that case, she does not need it." If Shaitan wasn't interested in prostrating before Adam, he could have fairly avoided it by differentiating himself from the angels and maintaining that the command was meant for them and not for him. In that case, he would not be asked to prostrate because jinns are not meant for human support, unlike angels, who are there to support and assist humans as much in commission of good things as in the omission of bad ones. But Shaitan was deranged by his pride, and pride always longs to show up. What agrees to hide is never pride. That's precisely what happened to Shaitan. He could not help vomit his assumed supremacy, thereby actually falling down to the lowest level. Nevertheless, with this idiotic conduct comes another significant aspect of Shaitan's personality. He knows he is ruined forever, and he also realizes that there's a lot of time yet to go before he's actually thrown into the fire of hell. That was just the beginning of the human race, and the end was way too far. So he did not like to sit idle for so long only to wait for his chastisement to happen. Instead, he decided to have some engagement to pass this whole lot of time. Therefore, Shaitan requested for indulgence till the last day, addressing Allah as his Lord. Quran chapter 15 verse 36 and chapter 38 verse 79. The respective verses next following these two verses say that his request was granted. Understandably, it could not be turned down because that could also imply that Allah was scared of Shaitan's disruptive potential. After this allowance, Shaitan opens up to disclose how he is going to utilize this respite. He said, "My Lord, you have seduced me, so I will adorn things on earth for them, and by your honor, I will seduce them all except such of them as are sincere." Quran chapter 15 verses 39-40 and chapter 38 verses 80-83. You must have noted that in spite of having irreversibly ruined his life at the hands of Allah, Shaitan honestly continues to accept him only as his Lord. So the first lesson to be learned from Shaitan's life is this: in opposition, do not distort and disfigure your opponent. More interesting yet is the Shaitan's swearing by Allah's honor while resolving to distract people from the way of Allah. Allah has booked him for hell and he swears by his honor. That's really amazing. Although Allah is justified in condemning him, yet Shaitan cannot be said to have foolishly respected Allah for having punished him. There's a difference. There's a different reason for this. Allah himself has given a lot of respect to Shaitan in spite of his defiance and rebellion. Through verse 98 of chapter 16, Allah has commanded Muslims thus: so when you read the Quran, seek refuge of Allah from Shaitan, the accursed. This is highly eloquent. If Allah only refuge were necessary for reading the Quran, then that alone could be commanded without adding the name of Shaitan. By including Shaitan's name also, Allah has prevented Muslims from forgetting him in course of time. Shaitan is not so powerful that he can stop people from reading Quran or doing whatever good they want to do. In the next following verse, 99 of the same chapter 16, Quran declares that Shaitan has no power over those who believe and have trust in their Lord. But still, Muslims have been commanded to utter the name of Shaitan also every time they want to read Quran, even if the desired portion of the Quran might not have the name of Allah in it. This is the lasting respect that Allah has extended to the accursed Shaitan. So here is the second lesson to learn from Shaitan's life. Always give respect to your opponent. Applied in life, this should be beautifying. With different people, we either agree or disagree. There's no other course. Now, in case of difference or defiance, we must continue to respect the other person. In case of accord, we ought to love him. Suffice it to say about love that it's the test of your level of agreement. The lesson of continuation of respect for the people we differ with is also taught by Allah, who himself has accorded the same to Shaitan despite his continuing disobedience. Another big lesson that is taught by Allah Almighty is that in spite of his rebellion, Shaitan deserves great appreciation for his courage to oppose none other than Allah himself. There is no better, bigger entity than him. And with his appreciation for Shaitan, Allah teaches us that if and when we do want to oppose, we must oppose only those who are bigger and stronger than us. Last but not the least lesson from Shaitan's conduct is that his decision to keep himself busy in distracting people until the last day, and Allah too has not denied him the respite to do that. In this also there is a great lesson that we should never waste our time and opportunity. Indolence is a bigger sin than any sin itself. Before winding up this episode, we may have a few words about the power that Shaitan is capable of wielding. Although he is not so powerful as to be irresistible, yet he has a virtual access to everyone. In our cyber age, he can be rightly described as the universal hacker, who has a remarkable extrasensory access to our psyche. Yet, instead of being just reckless, Shaitan employs this sickle only to vent his feelings of despair. Those who decide to do some good are not stopped by him. He dissuades those who are not inclined to do good. According to Quran, When Shaitan tells a man to disbelieve and the man disbelieves, he says, I have nothing to do with you. I fear Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Chapter 59, verse 16. It also adds, quote, and Shaitan says, when an issue is decided, Allah's promise to you was true. I too made a promise but didn't keep it. I had no power over you except that I invited you and you accepted my invitation. So do not blame me but blame yourselves. I cannot help you, nor can you help me. I rejected your making me a partner to Allah earlier. Chapter 14, verse 22. This may not look easily agreeable at first sight, as it appears to be morally inappropriate. One wonders as to how Shaitan can back out so easily and desert his friends. That may be correct, but Shaitan's argument isn't legally incorrect either. We the netizens are much better placed to understand it. All the objectionable content available on internet and social media for restricted viewing asks us to confirm that we are mature enough to watch, and our minors also confirm that the content providers do not do verification because they are not bound to do it, and we do not stand to blame them for viewing what otherwise our minors probably may not have viewed. This is more or less akin to what, for another example, mutual funds do by bombarding viewers with very powerful advertisements, thereby luring them to invest in them. But after using all possible inducements, they add the disclaimer that as mutual fund investments are subject to market risks, all scheme-related documents should be read carefully. Therefore, those who decide to invest in mutual funds do not have any argument to blame the promoters for any loss they may suffer. With this, I conclude this first episode with my best wishes for improvement in the social media which afford free global platforms to everyone without any fear or favor. Thank you so much for watching.